too
Yeah,
far.
I mean, certainly we always pray for unity. I would love to see a reunion between Rome and Lutherans, but it would have to be done with Rome changing quite a bit. So I don't know if it's a realistic possibility. Of course, also knowing that our sovereign God can do what he wants, so you never know. Um, but I don't foresee it happening in the immediate future, at least. But yeah, so there is a difference between kind of where Rome was pre-Trent and post-Trent. And Luther himself, especially earlier, I mean, later Luther got very cynical. A lot of Luther's later writings are, you can sense his kind of bitterness in his old age. Uh,
He's a
and there's,
character.
yeah, he was a character for sure. And there's some great later writings of Luther too. So like his Genesis lectures are wonderful, but there are some others that tend to be the ones we try to forget. Um, and to some extent, you can really understand the amount of stuff he went through. I mean, those life experiences that he had, he just was kind of worn out, like any of us would. I mean, I can't even imagine being in his position. But he was less optimistic about reunion. Now, initially, because there were talks of a council, the desire was that what became the Council of Trent would have proponents of the Reformation there, and that there would be a chance to sit at a table and really dialogue and talk through and work through some of these issues with the possibility of reunion. So Luther and Melanchthon as well were very optimistic at first. Melanchthon probably was more so later on than Luther was, the more he got hardened toward it. There was even, willingness, for example, on Melanchthon's part to say that he would submit to the authority of the Pope as the head of the church if, okay, now here's the big caveat, if it was acknowledged that the Pope being the head of the church was something that was done by human right, not by a divine necessity.
Okay.
Right. So they're even willing to say, yeah, we'll submit to the Pope as the Bishop of Rome, and we'll even say he's the head of the bishops because by human right we've decided that's the case. Which of course Rome was not okay with that. But that does go to show you kind of the mindset that people like Melanchthon and Luther had in looking at where Rome was at the time. So even when you get to the Council of Trent, you have a number of different figures that speak out on the question of justification. You've got a number of different proposals of Roman theologians, and some really did attempt to define justification in a way that would be consistent with where Luther was coming from. So even from the Roman side, there were still individuals who really did want to see reunion in that area as well. With the Lutherans, not quite the same with the Reformed. And there really hadn't been, I mean, Luther's teaching this doctrine of justification by faith alone, there'd never been a council that had made a decision on that question. It wasn't a question of dispute. So Luther consistently said, there's nothing in especially the ecumenical councils, but even in the later Western councils, there's nothing that disputes this idea of justification by faith alone at all. And he could point to sources earlier in the church, people like St. Ambrose, or he could point to a medieval theologian like Bernard of Clairvaux, who used the terminology of faith alone. I mean, even Thomas Aquinas in Romans 3:28 at one point puts that little word alone there that Luther is criticized for. And that's not to say that Aquinas and Luther are exactly the same on justification, but the point is that there are roots of the ideas that were developed by Luther throughout the history of the church at this point. So the reason I say it's different after Trent is because now Trent has an official rejection of this idea, right? Along with many other ideas as well. Whereas there was no official position. There were actually a variety of positions on these various issues prior to that.